Los Angeles, California, November 19th, 1988. Rain fell in relentless sheets across the city, a rare sustained downpour that transformed the typically sun-drenched landscape into something more melancholy and introspective. Inside the Westlake recording studio, Michael Jackson sat by a large window in the small break room, watching the storm while the technical team addressed an equipment issue that had temporarily halted the recording session for his upcoming album. At 30 years old, Michael existed at the absolute pinnacle of fame. Thriller had redefined what was possible in the music industry. Bad had confirmed his status as a global phenomenon rather than a momentary sensation, and his current world tour had broken attendance records across multiple continents. Yet despite this unparalleled success, or perhaps because of it, Michael often found himself in a state of profound isolation, separated from ordinary human experience by the very extraordinariness of his life and status. The studio's small break room provided a rare moment of solitude. His ever-present entourage of security personnel, assistants, and handlers had dispersed to make calls or attend to various tasks during the unexpected break. Even his longtime producer Quincy Jones had stepped out to address another project in an adjacent studio. For these few precious minutes, Michael was alone, a state so uncommon in his life that it felt almost disorienting. He sipped a cup of herbal tea, his reflection faintly visible in the rain-streaked window, the subdued lighting casting his features in gentle shadow. The rain hypnotized him, its rhythmic patterns against the glass, creating a natural percussion that his musical mind automatically began to structure into beats and phrases. His attention drifted, not to the next song or choreography sequence as it typically might, but simply to the moment itself, a quiet pocket of time unscheduled and unpressured, a rarity in his meticulously managed existence. Movement outside caught his eye. Across the street from the studio stood a small, unassuming diner, the kind of place that served breakfast all day and coffee in thick ceramic mugs. Its neon open sign glowed with particular warmth against the gray backdrop of the storm. From the diner's door emerged a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, clutching a paper bag that clearly contained her takeout meal. She wore simple dance clothes, leggings, a baggy sweatshirt, hair pulled back in a practical bun. The uniform of the countless aspiring dancers who populated Los Angeles, all pursuing the same dream that had once driven Michael himself. She had no umbrella. For a moment, she stood under the small awning of the diner, looking out at the downpour with evident dismay, clutching her food close as if to protect this small investment in her day. Michael expected her to duck back inside to wait out the worst of the storm, or perhaps attempt to flag down a taxi. The logical response is to finding oneself unprepared for such weather. Instead, what she did next caught him completely by surprise. The young dancer looked up at the sky, her profile visible to Michael through the rain-blurred window, and laughed. Not a nervous or frustrated laugh, but one of genuine amusement at her predicament. Then, with a small, defiant shrug, she stepped deliberately into the downpour. But she didn't run. She didn't hunch her shoulders against the onslaught or make the typical dash of someone caught in unwelcome weather. Instead, she walked deliberately, almost ceremoniously, through the rain. And then, in a gesture that caused Michael to set down his tea and move closer to the window, she began to dance. It wasn't formal choreography or practiced moves, but a spontaneous, joyful response to her circumstance. She executed a playful spin, her free hand extended to catch the rain while the other clutched her modest meal. She hopped over a puddle with exaggerated grace, turning the obstacle into an opportunity for expression. Her face, tilted occasionally toward the sky, registered not annoyance, but a kind of delighted surrender to the moment, an embrace of what could not be changed, transformed through her response into something approaching celebration. Michael watched transfixed. In his world of perfectionism and precision, where every movement was rehearsed until flawless, every public moment carefully managed, the unself-conscious abandon of the dancer in the rain struck him with unexpected force. She continued down the street, alternating between ordinary walking and these small bursts of improvised movement, until she disappeared around a corner. Likely heading to a rehearsal space or perhaps a second job, her brief performance witnessed, as far as she knew, by no one. For several minutes after she had gone, Michael remained at the window, still watching the empty street where this small, unexpected moment of human joy had unfolded. Something about it resonated deeply within him, touching a place that the adoration of millions somehow couldn't reach. Here was someone dancing not for an audience, not for acclaim or record sales or history, but simply for the private joy of existence, finding beauty and expression in circumstances that most would consider merely inconvenient. "Michael," the voice of his assistant broke his reverie. "They're ready for you in studio." He nodded, turning from the window with a slightly distracted air that caused his assistant to look at him with concern. "Everything okay?" she asked. Michael's response was soft, almost to himself. She was dancing in the rain. Just dancing. For no reason. The assistant, accustomed to the often enigmatic comments of her famous employer, simply nodded and held the door, assuming this was perhaps a lyric idea or concept for a future project. But as Michael returned to the recording studio, something had shifted subtly in his expression. A thoughtfulness, a slight softening around the eyes that those who knew him well might have recognized as the look he got when something had truly moved him. The recording session resumed, the technical issues resolved. To the engineers and musicians present, Michael seemed perhaps more introspective than usual, occasionally gazing into the middle distance during playbacks, his thoughts clearly elsewhere despite his professional focus on the work at hand. What none of them could know was that his mind kept returning to that brief, unguarded moment. The dancer in the rain, finding joy in circumstances that offered no obvious reason for celebration. 3 days later, Michael was reviewing a set of charitable donations that his business manager had prepared for his approval. The regular distributions to various foundations and causes that had become an increasingly significant focus in his life. As he scanned the list, he paused, pen hovering above the document. "I want to add something," he said to his manager, who sat across the desk awaiting his signature. "A dance scholarship program for unknown dancers, people who might never be discovered otherwise." The manager nodded, making a note. "Any particular schools or companies you want to focus on?" Michael thought for a moment, remembering the dancer's simple clothes, her modest takeout meal, signs of the financial struggle familiar to most artists before they achieve recognition. "No," he said finally. "I want it broader than that. Something that helps with living expenses, not just training. For dancers who are working multiple jobs, trying to stay afloat while they pursue their dream." He paused, then added more quietly, "For people who dance in the rain." His manager glanced up, somewhat puzzled by the specific image, but accustomed to Michael's often poetic way of expressing his intentions. "I'll have the foundation draw up a proposal," he confirmed, adding it to his notes. The Michael Jackson Dance Forward initiative would be formally launched 6 months later, with little fanfare at Michael's specific request. Unlike many of his charitable endeavors, this one received minimal publicity, though its impact would prove substantial over the years, providing not just training opportunities, but practical support for living expenses, health insurance, and other basic needs that often force talented dancers to abandon their artistic pursuits for financial reasons. If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more moments that define the king of pop's extraordinary journey. But the dancer in the rain influenced more than just this new charitable initiative. Those close to Michael during the months that followed noted subtle but significant shifts in his creative process and personal habits. He began taking more frequent walks, sometimes in disguise, sometimes in the controlled environment of his Neverland ranch, but always with a deliberate attention to his surroundings that seemed new. During rehearsal for his next tour, he occasionally surprised his team by stopping the meticulously planned proceedings to pursue a spontaneous creative idea, something that had become increasingly rare as his productions grew more technically complex and precisely choreographed. Most notably, several songs that would appear on his next album, Dangerous, began to take shape during this period. Compositions that explored themes of simple joy, of finding beauty in unexpected places, of the freedom that comes from authentic self-expression without the weight of audience expectation. One evening, about 4 months after the rainy day at Westlake Studios, Michael sat in the small recording booth he had installed in his home, working through melody ideas with just a keyboard and a simple recording setup. Another departure from his typically elaborate production process. His longtime engineer, who had been called to the house to assist with some technical adjustments, found him in an unusually reflective mood. "What do you think is the purest reason to create?" Michael asked suddenly, the question emerging without context. The engineer, somewhat surprised by the philosophical turn, considered his response carefully. "I suppose because you have to. Because something in you needs expression." Michael nodded, his fingers moving absently over the keyboard, finding chords that underscored their conversation. "I saw something once," he said quietly. "A dancer in the rain. She didn't know anyone was watching. She was just responding to the moment, finding joy in something most people would complain about." He played a gentle sequence of notes, a melody that seemed to capture the bittersweet quality of the memory. "I keep thinking about that, about creating from that place, not for the world, not for history or sales or applause, just because the rain is falling and your body wants to dance." The engineer, who had worked with Michael through multiple albums and had witnessed the increasing pressures and isolation that accompanied his unprecedented fame, recognized something significant in this reflection. "That sounds like freedom," he observed. Michael's hands stilled on the keyboard, his gaze distant. "Yes," he said softly. "That's exactly what it is." The conversation shifted to technical matters after that, but the concept remained, influencing both the lyrical content and the creative approach to several songs that would emerge during this period. Music critics would later note a particular quality in certain tracks from the Dangerous album, a vulnerability and authenticity that connected with audiences in ways that transcended even his earlier commercial successes. What these critics couldn't know was the genesis of this evolution. A random moment, a dancer in the rain, observed by chance through a studio window by the most famous performer in the world. 6 years later, during the planning stages for his History World Tour, Michael unexpectedly altered a key sequence in the show's choreography. The change came during a number that had traditionally featured precise, synchronized movement from all performers. His new direction called for a moment of improvisation from each dancer, a brief solo where they would express their individual interpretation of the music rather than executing the unified choreography that had been his trademark. When his creative director questioned the change, concerned about how it would fit with the meticulously planned production elements, Michael's explanation was simple. "I want to see them dance for themselves, not just for me or the audience. I want to see what moves them when no one's dictating the steps." The resulting sequence would become one of the most critically acclaimed elements of the tour, with reviewers noting the surprising emotional impact of these moments of individual expression amid the grand spectacle of the production. The dancers themselves, many of whom had worked with Michael for years, spoke of it as a transformative experience, a rare opportunity in the world of professional dance to bring their personal voice to a global stage. What remained private was Michael's quiet satisfaction each night as he watched these moments unfold. These small celebrations of dance for its own sake, these echoes of a rainy day in Los Angeles when an unknown dancer had unwittingly delivered a lesson in artistic authenticity to the king of pop. In later years, as Michael's life became increasingly complicated by legal battles, health issues, and the unrelenting scrutiny of global fame, those closest to him noted that he would occasionally reference the dancer in the rain during moments of particular stress or creative uncertainty. The phrase became something of a personal mantra, a reminder of what had drawn him to performance in the first place, before the weight of being Michael Jackson had transformed his relationship to his art and to the world. "Remember the dancer in the rain?" he would say softly, sometimes to himself, sometimes to a trusted colleague struggling with creative pressure. That's where the truth is. If you've been moved by this glimpse into a moment that influenced Michael Jackson's approach to art and giving, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Together, we keep alive the memory of the man behind the legend, the careful observer of human experience whose greatest wish was to translate that understanding into art that touched the world. The Dance Forward initiative continues its work today, administered by the Michael Jackson Estate with the same low-profile approach that characterized its founding. Thousands of dancers across the world have received support, many never knowing the full story of how a rainy day and a moment of unself-conscious joy inspired one of the world's greatest performers to create this legacy. And somewhere, perhaps, that unknown dancer, now in her 50s, might still occasionally find herself caught in an unexpected downpour. Perhaps sometimes, when no one is watching, she still allows herself that same spontaneous response, that same defiant joy in the face of circumstances that offer no obvious reason for celebration. If so, she could hardly imagine the ripples created by that single moment of authentic self-expression, observed by chance by someone who, despite his unparalleled fame and artistic achievements, recognized in her simple dance something he himself was in danger of losing: the purest reason to create, the most authentic source of artistic truth, joy for its own sake, unobserved and unrecorded, existing perfectly in a single transcendent moment.